Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Tenani. The last episode was the Bully 101 from Romper Room to the Boardroom mini course. The first part examined the child's bully, victim, and bystanders. The pecking order and the ripple effect of bullying was also discussed. Several types of child bullies and victims were revealed, as well as some reasons why child bullies engage in their dysfunctional behavior and how victims are chosen. TIs have reported that their kids are also bullied as part of the campaign, and gang stalkers also use their kids in the campaign. So it was important to talk about childhood bullying and give some insight into what was happening. Part 2 talked about office mobbing or workplace bullying, whichever you want to call it. It listed the several types of adult bullies and their cronies, as well as discussed how the office mobs virtually run the office, whether or not any members of the mob are in management positions. The connection between bullying and workplace violence was explored. Other harmful effects of office mobbing on the company's bottom line, customers, environment, and culture were also examined. TIs face 24/7 harassment and illegal surveillance, and the workplace is no exception. In their attempt to ruin the TI's career, cause financial devastation, and or drive the TI to poverty, the gang stalkers enlist knowing and unknowing co-workers to form office mobs and harass the TI. The gang stalkers also exploit their workplace and positions to harass TIs who shop or seek services in their place of business. It is possible that most gang stalkers use their employee access to confidential information to gather information about the TI and use it in the campaigns. It is especially serious since TIs have reported the involvement of members of the criminal administration system in gang stalking. This compromises the integrity of law enforcement entities and leaves communities vulnerable to domination by malicious mobs. Corruption within the criminal administration system is not new, but unfortunately, it has become accepted and or ignored by too many people. Since the power of this department is granted by the public and their activities are publicly funded by tax dollars, it is time for the public to demand that we get what we're paying for. The public should not pay for corruption. Those who do not respect the trust and authority granted to them need to be held accountable and should not be allowed to do their dirt in peace. We then explored the difference between self-confidence and self-esteem, as well as the difference between being assertive and aggressive. TI News shared reports of a high-profile bully-side case, a workplace shooting, and workplace bullying. Remember that gang stalking is a complex mixture of several crimes and methods. Bullying is just one of the many methods used to abuse TIs. The stalking, harassment, and other aspects are just as important to investigate. Alright, let's get started.
Now it's time for FYI, essential information for TIs. TIs may face many forms of psychological coercion during a campaign. Therefore, it is important that TIs are aware of the methods that may be used to cause emotional and psychological distress. You're about to receive some information about that right now.
A campaign may have started long before a TI is aware of it. In that time, perps may have come in and out of the TI's life through work, casual, platonic, or romantic relationships, all for the sake of information gathering. The TI's previously established friends, colleagues, partners, associates, and of course family may have been tapped into. The conditioning then starts without the TI's knowledge until the gang stalkers get the TI in a position where they feel the TI can't effectively stop the campaign. The campaign is ripe with many forms of psychological coercion, some of which have already been discussed. Another method that may be used is emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail can also be used used in non-gang stalking interactions so the bystanders can benefit from this information. The following comes from Emotional Blackmail When the People in Your Life Use Fear, Obligation, and Guilt to Manipulate You by Susan Forward, PhD. It comes from 2 book reviews, one by Book Notes by Frumi, and the other Direct Answers from Wayne and Tamara.
Some people overpower us and leave us feeling defeated. Why? How? What can we do about it? These are the central questions Susan Forward asked in her book, Emotional Blackmail. Emotional blackmail is a powerful form of manipulation in which people close to us threaten to punish us for not doing what they want. Emotional blackmailers know how much we value our relationship with them. They know our vulnerabilities and our deepest secrets. They can be our parents or partners, bosses or co-workers, friends or lovers. No matter how much they care about us, they use this intimate knowledge to win our compliance. People who are close to us threaten, either directly or indirectly, to punish us to get what they want. Knowing that we want love or approval, blackmailers threaten to withhold it or take it away altogether, or make us feel we must earn it. If you believe the blackmailer, you could fall into a pattern of letting him or her control your decisions and behavior. Blackmailers create a thick fog that obscures their actions. FOG is a shorthand way of referring to fear, obligation, and guilt. Blackmailers pump up on engulfing fog into their relationships, ensuring that we feel afraid to cross them, obligated to give them their way, and terribly guilty if we don't. Blackmail takes 2. It is a transaction. Following clarity comes change. It's easy to focus on other people's behavior and to think that if they change, things will be fine. The change has to begin with the blackmail target. Our compliance rewards the blackmailer, and every time we reward someone for a particular action, whether we realize it or not, we're letting them know in the strongest possible terms that they can do it again. The price we pay when we repeatedly give in to emotional blackmail is enormous. It eats away at us and escalates until it puts our most important relationships and our whole sense of self-respect in jeopardy. Part 1. Understanding the blackmail transaction. Diagnosis. Emotional blackmail. The issues may differ, but the tactics and actions will be the same and clearly recognizable. 1. A demand. It may be direct or indirect and may not even sound like a demand until the blackmailer is set in the course of action and is not willing to discuss or change it. 2. Resistance from the target. 3. Pressure. 4. Threats. 5. Compliance. 6. Repetition. Manipulation becomes emotional blackmail when it is used repeatedly to coerce us into complying with the blackmailer's demands at the expense of our own wishes and well-being. When you see other people are trying to get their own way, regardless of the cost to you, you're looking at the bottom line of the emotional blackmailer. There is little interest in compromise or conflict resolution.
That is just a brief introduction into emotional blackmail. More information will be given in the Know Thy Enemy segment. One of the more unsettling things that TIs have reported was the sense that they were being controlled. A general search about gang stalking will lead to mind control topics and secret government experimentations. Many other gang stalking sites delve into these topics. The more advanced topics fall into the corporate and military segments of gang stalking. Tenani will focus on the community and criminal administration segments because these seem to coincide often and are the most detrimental to society at this point in time. The criminal administration segment involves the use of gang stalkers to aid the police's attempt to infiltrate criminal activities or to silence those who report corruption within the criminal administration system. On the community level, members of the community or general public gang stalk a person for any reason. Reasons stem from the person just being an easy target, disputes, rivalries, unwanted neighbors, physical or ethnic differences, plain dislike, etc. The segments are not distinct and often overlap. The community usually supplies the workforce for the campaign by using influential locals to recruit, follow, harass, and spread misinformation about TIs. If you want to find out more about the methods used by the corporate or military segments, Google gang stalking. Most of the sites have information on it. Remember that gang stalkers also set up sites pretending to be TIs so they can make crazy claims that reflect poorly on the TI community. So don't be quick to dismiss all the claims. If you want to find out more about what Protect Life Now considers the gang stalking segments, please follow the link to the general information about gang stalking pamphlet that will be put in the description box for this episode. Whether or not it is a government-run operation is not the focus here. However, there's a possibility that it's not only a military or government operation. There is also a possibility that gang stalking may not be as expensive as once believed. It seems to have a mid to high startup cost in terms of time, energy, and money, but once it gets started, it could run itself, especially if the perps are carefully selected. Because of this, some of these gang stalking units are probably copycat operations. That's one reason why the community and criminal administration segments are so dangerous. Teenagers, young adults, and criminals are involved. These three groups alone can start and establish their own units in no time. Now, how could they manage all this psychological coercion without expensive and high-tech military devices? Here's a surprising alternative. The following comes from Hypnosis Training, Learn the 4-Stage Hypnosis Protocol by Cliff Me.
As James Braid has shown us through history, there are rules to follow and steps to take to induce a person into a hypnotic state. These steps are known today as the 4-stage formula. The 4-stage formula begins with stage 1 to absorb attention. Absorbing attention is simply to capture the focus of your subject. This requires intense concentration and the ability to draw your subject into you and to keep them following your lead with suggestions and language. After you have accomplished this, you can move on to the second stage. The second stage of the four-stage formula is to bypass the critical factor. Critical factor is known in hypnosis as the reasoning of the conscious mind that says this is not possible. Resistance to hypnotic trance is created when the critical factor stands between your subject and their hypnotic state. This must be bypassed in order for your subject to respond to you on an unconscious level. Once you have bypassed the critical factor, which you will learn as we move through different articles, you will be able to present hypnotic suggestions in the form of advice. As long as no critical factor is standing in the way, the suggestions will resonate with your subject and the advice will come out through the conscious mind and take effect. After you have bypassed all critical factors, stage 3 of the 4 stages is to activate an unconscious response. Activating unconscious responses is your sign that you have successfully led your subject into a hypnotic state. Any unconscious response is a positive sign for you as a hypnotist as well as for your client because you are doing your job. Unconscious responses can vary. A good example of an unconscious response is an emotional response. Emotional responses are derived from an unconscious level. You have no choice in your emotions. They are simply a product of your unconscious reacting to and implanting the thinking and understandings you possess. Make sure to note that if you are dealing with a subject that is in a heightened state of emotion, say a breakup or recent loss, the subject is already in their own hypnotic process. You, as the hypnotist, will have no control over a person in a hypnotic process of which you are not the authority. They will not listen to you or attempt to follow your suggestions. They are immune to your reasoning and need time to emerge from the state they are in before you can induce a hypnotic state of which you are in control of. You must be able to access and retrieve a response from the unconscious before you can begin working toward any desired outcome. This brings us to the fourth and final step in the 4 stages. The 4th stage is to lead unconscious to desired outcome. This step is simple to explain. Really, it is as it sounds. Once you have your subject in a hypnotic state and have accomplished the 3 previous stages, you will lead your subject through their unconscious by way of suggestions to obtain your desired outcome. When you successfully combine all 4 of the 4-stage formula, you will be engaging with your subject in a conversational hypnotic interaction. Wait a minute. Now you're saying that these gang stalkers are a group of hypnotists that covertly hypnotize people by looking at them. Now you're going a bit off. Have you ever heard of staring contest or just your typical stare down? Some people just do that for fun or to freak others out. I mean, come on.
I see where this seems absurd, but it is definitely possible. A lot of TIs complain that they feel psychologically manipulated, and at a basic, inexpensive level that allows the community and criminal administration segments of gang stalking to do this, conversational or street hypnosis would be the ideal choice. The use of hypnosis within the criminal administration system is not new. Listen to this. The following comes from Forensic Hypnosis, Using Hypnosis to Solve Crimes by Ray Jensen.
Hypnosis is finding a place in modern society in a wide variety of places and situations. One of the more unusual applications is called forensic hypnosis. Simply put, forensic hypnosis is hypnosis used to get witnesses or victims of crimes to remember things they may have forgotten or repressed. We all tend to forget the less important details of what goes on in our lives and around us. Often, even important things are forgotten, especially if they are dramatic or otherwise disturbing. Sometimes it is better to just forget certain things, but it is generally acknowledged that just about everything you see, hear, and experience is in your mind, hidden there somewhere. By heightening your awareness, hypnosis can help bring out those hidden memories. Over the last 40 to 50 years, forensic hypnosis has proven invaluable in helping to solve countless crimes that otherwise might have gone unsolved. It does not work every single time, but it has helped often enough to gain a solid position as a crime-fighting tool. But despite some success, the judicial courts of the world have often frowned on forensic hypnosis. In some cases, they have even made forensic hypnosis illegal. The problem is, hypnosis does not always bring out the truth. Sometimes what we think happened and what really happened is not the same thing. Hypnosis only brings out what we think we saw. The lawyers call this confabulation, which simply means memory distortion. As a result, information obtained during forensic hypnosis is not allowed as cold, hard evidence in a court of law. Hypnosis statements can be used in the investigation, but must always be supported by independent evidence. Another problem is the power the hypnotist holds over the person hypnotized. The hypnotist can't make the witness tell the truth, so it can't be used like a truth serum on a suspect or uncooperative witness. But the power the hypnotist holds over the witness cannot be underestimated. If the hypnotist suggests that he would like a certain answer, the person hypnotized is very likely to say or do whatever pleases the hypnotist. The witness has to be fully cooperative in the hypnosis or it won't work. But it can easily go too far and the witness says whatever the hypnotist wants to hear. As a result of these problems, courts and crime-fighting organizations around the world have established extremely strict procedures to be followed whenever forensic hypnosis is used. For example, only the court can conduct forensic hypnosis. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, and even crime investigators are not allowed to do their own forensic hypnosis. It is crucial that the hypnotist be totally unbiased in his approach and questioning. In the past, prosecutors have hired hypnotists and biased the witnesses' statements in their favor. Current procedures carefully guard against this. It is also standard practice to record all forensic hypnosis sessions from beginning to end. Even the witness interviews before and after the hypnosis have to be recorded. The hypnosis sessions are generally divided up into 3 parts: the pre-hypnosis interview, the hypnosis induction itself, and the post-hypnosis interview. The pre-hypnosis interview is the first time the hypnotist gets to talk with the witness. Stories have a way of changing over time, so it is important to get the witness's story just before and after the hypnosis session. Forensic hypnosis is radically different compared to clinical hypnosis. In clinical hypnosis, the patient wants to change something, either to stop smoking, lose weight, or something like that. In forensic hypnosis, it is crucial that nothing gets changed. The courts simply want unbiased, unmodified information for the investigation. There is still a lot to be learned about forensic hypnosis. The exact future of hypnosis in the legal courts is not clear, but forensic hypnosis definitely has proven to be a valuable crime-solving tool.
Yeah, but that's done willingly. The person has to agree to that. You can't just walk up to someone and hypnotize them. That's what you're saying that the gang stalkers do. They just walk up to these people and hypnotize them.
Actually, that's what street or conversational hypnosis does. It hypnotizes people without them knowing by covertly bypassing the subject's conscience. There is a video that shows a hypnotist getting out of a speeding ticket. In the end, he explains how it's done. I must make it clear that the video has nothing to do with gang stalking, and I am not suggesting that the creator or anyone involved is a gang stalker. It is being used strictly as an illustration. With that said, the video also illustrates methods that gang stalkers use to be on the lookout for a TI. Call or text each other when the TI is nearby, do something to get the TI's attention, but nothing too drastic to alarm the audience, and then try to make the TI do what they want. The video has nothing to do with gang stalking, and I am not suggesting that the creator or anyone involved is a gang stalker. It is being used strictly as an illustration. In the video, the hypnotist and his friends drive around looking for a cop to deliberately give him a ticket so that he could get out of it and explain to the viewers how it's done. Go to the link in the description box to see the video. It will also be posted in Protect Life Now's must-see list on the Protect Life Now YouTube channel. The video is called Hypnotist Gets Out of Speeding Ticket. Amazing. Check it out. For now, here's more detail about conversational hypnosis. The following comes from Conversational Hypnosis. With great power comes great responsibility, by Ian R. Davis.
Conversational hypnosis is a technique of hypnosis that can be used on any person whilst they are still conscious without them having any awareness of it. By using apparently simple conversation combined with subtle yet powerful mannerisms, cadences, etc., the hypnotist is able to implant coercive thoughts into the subject's subconscious mind. Therefore, conversational hypnosis differs from other traditional forms of hypnosis because it is dependent upon both the subject's continued consciousness, they do not go into a sleep-like trance, and their total obliviousness to the fact that they are being hypnotized. Herein lays the main reason why conversational hypnosis is both so powerful and so controversial. It is powerful and certainly at its most effective when the subject has no awareness whatsoever that they are being hypnotized. This means that they have no conscious rejection of the suggested thought processes made by the conversational hypnotist. Consequently, these thoughts are adopted by the subject as their own, and they are far more likely to act on them without the continued reinforcement often required in other forms of hypnotism. However, often referred to as covert or street hypnosis, it is seen by some as controversial for exactly the same reason. Quite simply, some feel it is unethical to hypnotize someone without their express consent. This situation is not exactly helped by the fact that some conversational hypnotists refer to the technique as covert hypnosis. In addition, they continue to promote the myth that conversational hypnosis is in some way magic or a dark art. The recent emergence of relatively inexpensive online training courses have placed conversational hypnosis within the reach of the general public. Unfortunately, even some of the better training courses available continue to play upon this image. Whilst it is perhaps understandable from a marketing perspective, especially given the traditional theatrical background of some of the leading conversational hypnotists, as anyone who actually studies this fascinating technique soon discovers, conversational hypnosis is far from being hocus pocus, but is rather a functioning set of scientifically proven techniques based upon well-funded psychological observation and practice. However, conversational hypnosis is simply a skill that anybody who applies himself can learn. Like any other powerful technique that can affect others, it has no morality. The morality of its use is down to the individual that uses it. For example, anyone can learn to write. Thereafter, they can either write beautiful poetry that lifts and inspires, or vicious hate mail that drives the recipient to an early grave. The point is that it's not the act of writing that is immoral, but rather how the individual chooses to use their skill. In the same way, you can use conversational hypnosis to help and support others' personal development. You can use it to build your business or improve your love life, or you can use it to ridicule other people or make them have negative and destructive experiences.
If they are hypnotized, then why don't they just do everything the gang stalkers tell them to? How is it that they can fight back and post videos about this stuff if the gang stalkers want to keep it a secret? Hypnotized people are completely under the control of the hypnotist.
That's not always true. While there may be triggers or prompts used as a cue to get the TI to respond a certain way, it doesn't always work. Let's elaborate.
The following comes from Is Getting into a Hypnotic State a Good Idea? By Suburban Trends.
Hypnosis can also work by identifying trigger points. For example, she said one woman who had just had a baby wanted to quit smoking. Through hypnosis, Anderson associated smoking with a visualization of her baby's door being locked. After that, every time the woman lit a cigarette, she associated it with not being able to get to her baby. Within a week, Anderson said she had quit. Hypnosis will not make you do anything you don't want, however. Hypnosis can't change your will, Anderson said. If you don't want to do something, you won't do it. Results are usually small changes that result in a slow decrease in bad habits. By the end of the class, they won't stop smoking, but they will start thinking, "Do I really need this one cigarette?" Anderson said.
This is why conversational hypnosis is not the sole method. In order for the TIs to be more receptive to the suggestions, other methods are used to break the TIs down and degrade their self-perception. Hence, the constant illegal surveillance, office mobbing, stalking, character assassination, defamation, harassment, abuse, among other things. It all works together to get to the goal. A distinction must be made between traditional hypnosis and street hypnosis or conversational hypnosis. In traditional hypnosis, the hypnotist and the subject are both willing parties, and there is a certain level of trust established. While traditional hypnosis sessions may use conversational hypnosis and vice versa, street hypnosis can be used on unwilling and unknowing subjects, and the level of trust is not as high because covert methods are used to bypass the subject's conscience. A good point was made about the usual stare downs and staring contest. Just so you don't freak out when someone is staring at you, here is more about the hypnotic gaze. The purpose of sharing this information is not for you to misuse hypnosis, but so you don't go around thinking that everyone who is staring at you is trying to hypnotize you. It's to help you recognize if it's being used. The hypnotic gaze is just one of many induction methods, so the important thing is to find ways to personally know when you are being unwillingly influenced.
The following comes from The Great Hypnosis Secret: How to Use the Hypnotic Gaze by Clifford Mee.
The hypnotic gaze induction is a powerful piece of language that requires more thought behind your actions and composure rather than words. The hypnotic gaze induction can and will be used in many instances to run through the 4-stage protocol with many of your subjects. This is a skill that once learned will absorb attention, bypass critical factor, provoke an unconscious response, and set the scene for you to direct that response. It really takes care of it all when you learn to do it correctly. You must keep an eye on, no pun intended, the sub-communications you send and go first in the feeling of goodwill. You want to transmit through your body language that you mean for this to be a pleasant experience of mutual cooperation. Finally, you also need to be aware of the direct or indirect approach to take with each different individual you are working with. For now, you should be concentrating on the more direct method of the hypnotic gaze. But as time goes on, you will be able to be less direct in this skill. Keep in mind to have your confidence and your insecurities checked at the door. All of this will help ensure the best hypnotic gaze environment for both you and the person you are working with. Now you have heard and read in depth about what the hypnotic gaze is and what it will do for you as a hypnotist. Next, in this article, you will really dive into what this technique can do for you. You will travel along the lines of what the hypnotic gaze induction procedure is, how it starts, where it goes, and where it ends. Step 1. The setup. You should not be surprised when the first step of this induction, as with any induction, is going first. The thing you will want to go first in are the projection of feelings like comfort, ease, and goodwill. You will use instant rapport techniques to project these feelings and states of being to your listener through your sub-communications. Of course, you want to do this because these are the feelings and attitudes that are necessary for your subject to feel upon entering hypnosis. You also want to go first in these matters because you also need to enter a sort of trance. You will want to access an outside trance, whereas your subject will be going into an inside trance. These are both very different and necessary in an induction. The outside trance that you will be entering into will not be a picture of you slumped in your chair, feeling all glossy and glazy. The way you go into an outside trance or a hypnotist trance is to expand yourself into the room. Open up your senses. Expand your vision, hearing, and feelings into the room and really have a sense of open awareness. Your attention should be focused outward, and you will have no trouble functioning in your environment. In doing all this, you really have just set up the environment for your subject, yourself, and the art of hypnosis. You have instilled a sense of comfort, ease, and goodwill between you and your subject and projected it into your environment as well using your instant rapport skills. Step 2. How to focus the hypnotic gaze. The next step in the hypnotic gaze induction is to focus your hypnotic gaze. You will do this by first making eye contact. As you maintain that eye contact, make sure you are aware to keep the sense of goodwill and comfort flowing from your eyes. You can do this by making them soft or through smiling eyes. No cold, hard, forced stares. Just a soft focus with gentle, upturned corners of the eyes. This is a comfortable, non-intimidating feeling. It may be helpful to remember this is a gaze, not a staring contest. As you start your induction, you will need to start on the outside and slowly move inside, and then beyond. This means you will start with the eye contact and then slowly shift your gaze to looking within them. It will seem as though you are looking 3 to 4 inches inside their head. This will sub-communicate that you are going deeper within them, and they should do the same. After that, you will again want to shift your gaze to looking at the back of their head, and finally, completely through their head as if you are focused on an object 3 to 4 feet directly behind them, as though you are staring right through their entire head. What you are doing in all this shifting, focusing, and reshifting of your gaze is telling them with your unconscious communications that it is time to go within. The deeper they see you go within them, the deeper they will unconsciously recognize they need to go. This is a very important part of the induction, and you must practice it and learn it well. You can practice this with different objects or with people you are conversing with on a regular basis. Practicing the focus and shifting of your gaze, see how it changes and changes within you. Get comfortable with it. Step 3. Create a slow, soft, calming mental state. The third step in this induction is to use a hypnotic tonality. This should be an easy step to put into action, as you have probably been practicing this from the beginning of your hypnosis study. To use your tonality, you will use your voice to slow everything down and create space in your language. Tonality in the hypnotic gaze induction should be soft, calm, and soothing. Think of how you would console an injured child or animal. You want to project yourself as trustworthy and exhibit kind, calming sounds in your voice. You will use these as you speak to your subject and as you gaze at them. Step 4. Bring your subject into trance. The fourth and final step is to describe the trance experience. This is where you begin to really verbally let your subject know they are entering a trance. You will want to remember all the signal recognition signs so you can describe in detail to the person what is happening or what should be happening to them. As you describe these signals, it will let the person you are working with know that they are entering a trance. The types of subjects to focus on here are the relaxation of the face, muscles, and eyes, as well as changes in their breathing and the way they perceive their environment. Any of the trance signals in signal recognition are acceptable topics in this phase of induction. Be sure to keep a good focus on your subject as you do this. If they actually begin to do any of these things you are describing or other trance signals, you will want to take advantage of describing those exact things back to them in order to reinforce the trance induction. This creates a strong double feedback loop. You will tell them what they should be doing. They do it, you describe it back to them, so on and so forth. This is a strong sign that they are going into a trance. Entailing all these steps and recognizing all the responses in the hypnotic gaze induction is the recipe for a very strong, powerful induction into a hypnotic trance.
Some of the subcommunications could be the feeling that this person knows or thinks they know you. This could be one of the effects of the constant surveillance. Stalkers usually lose touch with reality and start to actually believe that they know their victim because of their psychotic obsession. The perps overstep social boundaries and try to force their presence on the TI. This also confuses the TI because a different perp is used most of the time. So a TI could be out shopping when a stranger approaches them like they've met before and starts talking about things they think the TI is interested in. The hypnotist also always has to display confidence, so this is one reason why even the most base gang stalker behaves as if they are superior to the TI. Note that in the setup, the hypnotist is told to go first and project feelings of comfort, ease, and goodwill. Some perps are friendly until they think the TI is under control, then suddenly turn malicious. They are initially nice to draw the TI in, so a perp may look at you, smile, then look away. Sometimes they give the signal. They get your attention, then appear as if they are no longer paying attention to you. People who have mastered the hypnotic gaze learn how to do this without direct eye contact once they get the subject's attention. On the flip side, some perps use hostile stares to get and keep the TI's attention. This is either followed by continued hostility or a sudden pleasant attitude. This usually also confuses the TI. Confusion is another induction method. Building rapport with the subject doesn't necessarily have to be positive. It's more about having solid connections of some sort. That's why a good or bad connection could be used. It's just that a good rapport has a higher chance of success and looks better to the audience. Now, most TIs notice that the perps act a bit strange before direct contact. Notice that the excerpt stated you also want to go first in these matters because you also need to enter a sort of trance. You will want to access an outside trance, whereas your subject will be going into an inside trance. This may give TIs a sense of isolation with a perp, while the perp may seem weird or disconnected from everything else. It could be what is happening when a perp walks by a TI, does something or gives the prompt to get the TI's attention, and then stands nearby seemingly not paying attention to the TI, but the TI can sense that they are being stared at. The subject is being drawn into an inside trance, which means that the subject would probably be focused inside, wondering what's going on, or thinking about something else, less aware of the environment except for the hypnotist and him or herself. Whereas the hypnotist develops a heightened awareness of the environment, but is still focused on the subject. Remember that the hypnotist goes in first with the outside trance and then draws the subject in. So this may be one of the reasons for the weird and focused state of the perps when they surround a TI. Gang stalkers have a tendency to ruin good things. Hypnosis is not bad, but these perps may be using it to hurt, not help others.
One part that may explain why TIs have reported that they feel psychological coercion on some level states what you are doing in all this shifting, focusing, and reshifting of your gaze is telling them with your unconscious communication that it is time to go within. The deeper they see you go within them, the deeper they will unconsciously recognize they need to go. This might be where the subject gets the feeling that the hypnotist is in their head.
In step 4, the hypnotist is supposed to let the subject know that they are entering a trance. Now, a perp is not going to go up to the TI and guide them through this. However, after a long hard stare, the perp may approach the TI and finish up with conversational hypnosis, or an indirect conversation within the TI's hearing may use conversational hypnosis to do this. So, while a TI may have been caught up thinking they are competing in a stare down, while wondering why some of the perps are not getting defensive back, but knowing that something is happening, this may be it. I don't want you to get anxious and think this is the only method they're using. It is a possible method. This information is to raise your awareness so that if this is what's going on, you can recognize it and think of ways to neutralize or prevent it. Hypnosis is effective, but it is possible to break out of a trance or stop yourself from being hypnotized. If you've ever seen a hypnotist show, you'll notice that some of the subjects just break the trance naturally, and the hypnotist sends them back to their seat. Hypnosis does not always work. You should just be aware of your mental state, and now that you know some of the steps and what to look for, you can figure out ways to protect yourself from unwanted trance states and other forms of psychological coercion. So that's how the hypnotic gaze is done. Here is the secret behind it. The following comes from The Secrets of the Hypnotic Gaze Induction Revealed by Clifford May.
The art of hypnosis and learning hypnosis is all about learning how to use language, body language, gestures, and unconscious sub-communications. These inductions will largely be taking place through your ability to use your language in certain ways. However, there are other important aspects and skills that you will combine with language in order to alter the state of mind of your subjects. One of those other various skills will be using the hypnotic gaze. This is not a certain look you will shoot across the room at a person and they will suddenly slump over into a deep sleep. Quite the contrary. This is a skill you will practice, perfect, and use to invite a person into the world of induced hypnotic trance. This is a skill you will learn to use in the context of normal conversation. You will use it along with your language skills to induce a hypnotic trance and produce an outcome. The hypnotic gaze induction is a tool you will first learn to use very directly. People will see you are doing it. They may not quite know what you are doing, but the actual gazing will be detected. It must be as you will be looking directly into their eyes. As time goes on, you will be able to refine your gazing skills to become more indirect and conversational as you apply your hypnotic gaze. Again, this is not a willpower type of thing that you read about in storybooks. You will not be able to simply look at a person and will them into a trance. There is not form of overpowering an individual with a simple look that will produce a trance alone. What you will do is get their attention by making direct eye contact with them. This direct eye contact will affect them on many different levels, allowing you to coax them into an altered consciousness. Eye contact, as you will soon see, does have a very powerful effect on people. Because of this simple fact, you will need to be aware of the different signals you can send with it, and be sure to send the signals that will have the best intention for both of you. It needs to be clear in your mind that you are not overpowering someone with your will. You are not producing a mind-controlling magnetism, and you are not creating any type of occult condition. You are having a natural effect on another person through the very natural effects of eye contact. The first thing that a hypnotic gaze will do for you is to absorb the attention of the person you are applying it to. It is a great and powerful way to do this. Hypnotic gaze can assist in the first stage of the 4-stage protocol, absorbing the attention of your subject. How does it do this? Well, the simple fact is when you make and maintain eye contact with another person, it obligates them to respond in some way. That very thing, that obligation, is what begins the trance response. It gives you the ability to turn that eye contact into a hypnotic induction. The simple, unspoken demand for attention through eye contact begins the trance process. The second thing that will take effect in the hypnotic gaze is it raises tension in the other person. This is a response. The eye contact increases responses through the tension it raises in the person you are locked in with. This does two things in your favor as the hypnotist. The first is that the tension that is being produced from the constant eye contact will drive a feeling of obligated response from your subject. The second thing this tension accomplishes is the bypass of the critical factor. Remember, the more tension that builds, the more unconscious the person's thinking will be, meaning the less critical factor will be in place. This direct, unconscious way of thinking allows you to move smoothly into the suggestion phase, the third phase of the hypnotic protocol. In this, we find the third secret of the hypnotic gaze, that is to subtly suggest a hypnotic trance. The way to incorporate this new step is to find it in you first. Yes, go first. If you are accessing and sending out the signals of hypnotic trance, it will non-verbally invite the other person to do the same. Going first in this instance is to alter your eye contact that you have been diligently maintaining to look through them. Instead of focusing your eyes on their eyes, look to the backs of their eyes. This will give the person the feeling that they are no longer being looked at, but they are being looked inside. This will communicate that you are in a sort of trance, and unconsciously they will want to follow that lead. The next step that you need to be very aware of is that you should not just be subcommunicating that they go into a trance, but that there is a connotation of goodwill involved. Projecting goodwill to the person you are involved with is very, very important. You will get back whatever you are projecting through your gaze. If the person feels you are hostile, they will be defensive. If they feel intimidated, you will start to lose rapport. These are not good things, and so to be conscious of the feelings you are projecting is important for the process to continue. Projecting goodwill onto the person you are gazing at is as easy as feeling it yourself. Think about how you want them to feel that feeling of goodwill. Will it to them. In doing this, your body language will change with your mood and give subtle suggestions about the interaction you would like to have with them. The fifth secret of the hypnotic gaze is that confidence breeds success. To be confident in your actions will result in success from your actions. If you do not have expectations, positive expectations, going into this trance, you will not get positive results. The sub-communication of insecurity and hesitation will affect the success of your induction badly. You must expect the other person to go into a trance. To do this, there are things you need to watch in yourself to be sure you are sending the right signals out. The simple fact is you must avoid showing any automatic defense mechanisms. These are things like blinking too much, yawning, shifting your gaze excessively, fidgeting, and so on. Basically, the things that make you look nervous and unsure of yourself. You want to project goodwill and confidence. This is done by having softer features in your face, eyes relaxed, breathing normally and comfortably. On the other hand, you want your subject to be doing the opposite. When they are showing the automatic defense mechanism, it is a signal to you that they are building pressure within. That pressure means they are beginning to respond to you hypnotically. As this tension builds, they will lose the will to want to escape it. They will be open to your suggestion. When you see the signals that this is happening, you will make a clear and concise direct instruction for them to go into trance. In building up to this suggestion to go into trance, you will maintain a constant gaze. You will keep it in a friendly manner that is conveyed softly to them. This will keep them comfortable and relaxed enough to agree with your suggestion when the time is right.
Take note of the sentence. As time goes on, you will be able to refine your gazing skills to become more indirect and conversational as you apply your hypnotic gaze. This reiterates a point that was made earlier about the hypnotic gaze becoming less direct with practice. Another part states, remember, the more tension that builds, the more unconscious the person's thinking will be, meaning the less critical factor will be in place. This direct, unconscious way of thinking allows you to move smoothly into the suggestion phase, the third phase of the hypnotic protocol. Take this part with caution because tension has also helped break the trance. So it could go either way. It also goes on to say, on the other hand, you want your subject to be doing the opposite. When they are showing the automatic defense mechanism, it is a signal to you they are building pressure within. The pressure means that they are beginning to respond to you hypnotically. As this tension builds, they will lose the will to want to escape it. They will be open to your suggestion. When you see the signals that this is happening, you will make a clear and concise Some people respond this way, but not everybody. It is inconsistent and depends on the person, so test it objectively. It is definitely possible to resist any type of hypnosis. An important thing to remember is to admit to yourself if you are succumbing to it and make necessary adjustments. If you just resist and lie if you find yourself going into a trance, then you will probably get hypnotized. Being aware of your state of mind while admitting and being proactive about harmful changes will help you resist hypnosis. It says that part of it is to subcommunicate goodwill. So a TI may notice that although you may be upset, some perps may act as if they are trying to help you. Some perps are usually nice and then turn mean after your guard is down. The TI may not have noticed why she or he let his or her guard down, or believe that maybe the perp wasn't so bad after all. Now a TI is aware of one possibility of why this occurred. Some perps might use intimidation and hostility instead of projecting goodwill because that is what they're used to and what works for them. The threat of conflict or confrontation makes some people subconsciously submissive in order to avoid it, so hostile gazes may also work. Some may use a hostile gaze to get the TI's attention and then subcommunicate goodwill in order to take advantage of the relief of avoiding confrontation, which may make some people more open or submissive in order to keep the illusion of peace. On a lighter note, this tactic is used a lot in dating situations, not necessarily for hypnotic purposes, but just to illustrate the point. Some females out there have probably ran into a guy who acted like a jerk and upset them, then suddenly admitted to it and offered to make it up to her by buying dinner, lunch, or something else to smooth things over. Really, it's a trick to get your attention and to keep the interaction going. Or guys, you may have noticed that when you are paying a lot of attention to one girl, another girl may get jealous and act catty or get loud to get your attention, then later soften up once the other female is out of the picture. That was just to illustrate the Jekyll to Hyde tactic to get and keep someone's attention. Another induction method is to use stories. Again, don't think that everyone who suddenly starts talking to you and with scattered stories is trying to hypnotize you. Here is how it's done to give you some ideas on how to find out if this is happening to you. Remember to develop ways to personally recognize when you are being unwillingly and covertly influenced. The following comes from How to Design Nested Loops and Hypnotic Stories, Part 1, The 5 Stories, by Clifford May.
Nested loops are very important to your conversational hypnosis. They will be a part of your hypnosis that, if used correctly, will help you to draw in your subject, bypass their critical factor, offer you a place to leave your suggestions, and create amnesia. All these are important parts of the hypnotic process and will be valuable in accomplishing your goals. The first step that you will want to consider is how many stories you will be using. This can change as you go through your nested loop, as you can build loops inside of loops, but after you reach the suggestion and trance process phase, you will not be adding any more stories. In this article, you will be looking at the construction of a nested loop with 5 stories in it. The 5 types of stories will be: first, a very short example. This will be a true life story from your experiences. It can be an example of how to tell a story or something that happened to you at the grocery store. The important thing to do with this first story is to keep it short and conversational. The reason for this are twofold. You want your story short so that the listener is really drawn into it without getting too much. You don't want them to feel overloaded yet. You also want to use a short story that is true because it will make an impact on the listener. The reason for keeping your very first story one that can be conversational goes for any type of story you choose to tell first, and that is you want an easy start. This is a smooth way to flow into all your stories. The listener knows they are hearing a story, but it is interesting and something they would normally hear in an everyday conversation. There is a comfort in that. The second story you will use for this example is an antidote. An antidote is a story that is a true life event that happened to you, but with more storytelling aspects to it than the previous story. When you hear an antidote, you will immediately recognize it as a story because there are some story characteristics built into it. You use more of the sensory-rich descriptions to set an entire scene. Who was there? Where they were? How did things happen? What were the causes and effects within the story? The third story you will use in this nested loop will be what is called a direct story. This is a story that has all the specific characteristics of a real story. It will never present itself in a way that can be interpreted any other way than it is a story. It will display that there is no question about the fact that it is an invented story that has been made up and told as a story. The fourth story in the 5-story loop you are working with here will be a fairy tale. Fairy tales are great stories to use. Almost everyone can relate to them on some level because most people grew up listening to them. The fairy tale will bring a childhood comfort to your listeners because they have been conditioned throughout life to hear fairy tales and know how to listen to them. Because fairy tales are so familiar to most people, they will in a way start to form a trance for the person simply because of the type of story it is. As you decide to tell fairy tales, you must always remember to shape them in a way that targets the adult audience if that is who you are working with. You don't want them to feel weird or out of place listening to a child's story. Finally, the 5th story in this nested loop instruction will be another type of direct story. You can tell a hybrid of a genuine story and the made-up story. This can be a direct story in the sense that it is a true event with story characteristics that are recognizable to your listener. But it can also have fictional counterparts added in. A storyteller, for example, that is obviously a fictional character. Stories like this can be easily turned into completely direct stories or anecdotes too. So now you have your 5 stories to use in the actual construction of your nested loop. It is important to remember that the types of stories here are not set in stone. You will want to use a series of types of stories that best serve the purpose of your hypnosis session. These are simply good examples to get some ideas and thoughts flowing through your head. You can also change stories. You don't always have to tell the story the same. Make it customized for your listener so you can really pull the emotion or state you are looking for from them. In the 5 stories you have above to use in your nested loop, you will notice that naturally, as you tell these stories in order, the length of them will be important. You have read and been told that a story can last a few minutes or hours upon hours. For this instruction, you will make your first story very short, the second story a bit longer than the first, the third story around the same length as the second, the fourth story will be longer than all the preceding stories, and the fifth story will be the longest of the whole bunch. This is one natural way of drawing your listener in. You have worked up to the longest story, making each one before it shorter, and because of this, it is easy to follow your lead and keep an uninterrupted flow. Part 2. What to do with the 5 stories. Now you have your 5 stories, and you need to know what to do with them. Remember, the 5 stories you are using are merely examples. When you come to the point of constructing your own nested loops, you will choose stories that fit the event, problem, or occasion your client is dealing with. They do not have to be told in this order, nor do they have to be the same types of stories, as long as you put thought into the reasons why you are choosing the stories you are choosing, which you will read about in a little bit. You will use the same types of structures as you have learned on how to use nested loops. You will begin with story 1, tell it partially, then move to story 2, and then story 3. Story 4, the fairy tale, you will tell completely. You will begin and end it as if you were just telling a normal story without stopping 80% of the way through. In doing this, you are creating a loop inside of your nested loops. This is called a mini loop. It will be more natural if you open and close some loops within. This is common among storytellers in that your audience will finally get a resolution to something. It may not be a complete resolution, as you still have 3 other stories open, but this mini loop will become a closed-up loop within the structure of the bigger nested loop picture. Because it is story 4 and it is somewhere in the middle, you are not hindering the amnesia that will eventually be created by closing the other 4 stories in reverse. After you tell story 4 completely, you will transition with a hard or soft loop, as you will do between all your stories, and move back into a piece of story 3, then into the beginning of story 5. This will keep the flow for when you close these remaining 4 stories. There will be a connection for the mind between story 3 and 5. Now you come to the space where you will leave your suggestion and use your trance process. After that, you will start to tell the endings to your stories in reverse order. First, story 5, then story 3, because story 4 is already a complete entity, then story 2, and finally story 1. Designing your loop in this fashion with a mini loop within it will make your nested loops more interesting, less mundane and rigid. It will add some color and a little gratification for your listener when they get some resolution to the 4th story before the entire nested loop is completed. Now you have completed your nested loop, and you can see how it all works together. You want to be sure to add other conversational hypnosis aspects to these stories as you create them. The piggyback principle, seeding, rapport hooks, really any of the principles you have learned to get the listener all drawn in and tied up in your stories. As you start to create new stories and select the stories you will use, you want to keep a theme in mind. Know what it is you want to embed inside your listener before you get to the big bombshell of open space, suggestions, and trance processes. Use ambiguity to make the themes less obvious, but still apparent to the unconscious, so your listener takes one thing from the meaning they consciously hear, and a completely different thing from the interpretation of the unconscious. It is also important, as you construct your nested loops and choose the stories you will use, to have a stock of stories you really love, ones you find personal value in. Remember, you always want to go first in the state you wish to project onto and bring out of your subject. When you are using some stories you find personal value in that also fit the context in which you are working, they will be beneficial for both of you. This is one of the best ways to select and construct stories for your nested loops. It is not the only way, of course, and you will grow into what works best for you.
These are just 2 of the many tools that can be used in conversational or street hypnosis. Hypnosis is a powerful and effective tool. When used properly, it can help people overcome some issues, albeit sometimes only temporarily. However, some people abuse misuse it and use it to hurt others. It's like mental medication. Medicine for the body can heal or hurt the recipient. A malicious person can slip someone an overdose of an over-the-counter medication and cause the recipient harm. Similarly, a hypnotist can use conversational or street hypnosis on a person's psyche and cause just as much or even more harm. Bottom line is that no one should be hypnotized against their will. There are responsible and ethical hypnotists. The main concern lies with those who misuse hypnosis for life-damaging or life-threatening results. How can this be regulated or even proved? It appears to be a daunting task, but as with everything, taking the first step in the right direction is the best move. Street theater is initially thought of as a way to disturb the TIs and let them know that they are being followed. However, street theater, not the ridiculous ones that are retold on the show, but the more serious acts, could also be strong suggestions indirectly made to the TI. After all, one of the ideas about covert hypnosis is indirect approaches so that the person doesn't realize it's happening. It could bypass the critical factor, especially those relating to details of the TI's life, and implant suggestions. TIs have reported that some of the perps look smug and satisfied with themselves if the TI pays attention to them, approaches them, or speaks to them. On the surface, it's like the satisfaction similar to a kid who deliberately wanted to get someone mad and did it. But there may be more to it than that. There is some twisted method to this madness. The perps think that they made you talk or approach them, but in more than the immature I got your way. If everything is put together and conversational hypnosis methods are considered, the perps probably think you actually subconsciously gave in to their hypnotic suggestion. Again, a goal of conversational hypnosis is to distract the conscious mind or cause the person to introvert in order to communicate subconsciously. All the honking, U-turns, whistling, coughing, constant surveillance, people around you all the time, is to keep you consciously distracted. The perps talking indirectly or loudly about the TI's personal life could be a form of storytelling used in conversational hypnosis. Because of the personal details coming out from strangers, the TI becomes fixated on the conversation, which allows hypnotic suggestions to be injected without knowledge. It works, but does it work all the time? Fortunately, no. That's the beauty of hypnosis. Its effectiveness varies with the subject's cooperation. When it does work, TIs may find themselves responding against their will or as if they were being controlled by an external source. TIs can consider the possibility that street hypnosis was used, and if this is what is happening, they can start neutralizing it with conscious awareness. If the issue is not due to conversational hypnosis, then the TI should review other causes. This isn't to override TI's claims on the use of high-tech psychological coercion on the corporate and or military level. Gang stalking can involve a myriad of methods. This is just a possibility of what is happening at the community and criminal administration levels. This may be what is done by the street teams, a basic level of psychological coercion that can be taught to the lower level gang stalkers. Not all perps will be good at it, but the number of people doing it may increase the chances that it will be effective. However, TIs could use the less effective gang stalkers to help desensitize and lessen the effect of the more effective perps. Now, in the more advanced levels, gang stalking's puppet masters and handlers, a more advanced level of psychological coercion is used. How do you get someone who may consider him or herself a decent person to engage in these criminal activities? A previous episode touched on the recruitment process, but a remarkable video was found that demonstrated how average law-abiding citizens can be conditioned to engage in criminal activities with little to no remorse. It's a must-see for TIs who may recognize similar elements to the campaigns against them, but it also gives ideas about gang stalkers' training and selection by handlers and puppet masters, the heads of the gang stalking operation. It goes beyond traditional and conversational hypnosis. I must make it clear that the video has nothing to do with gang stalking, and I am not suggesting that the creator or anyone involved is a gang stalker. It is being used strictly as an illustration. The video is called The Heist. A link to the full video will be posted in the description box. If you watch it, notice how carefully the four are selected. The same is probably true for gang stalking. Not everyone will engage in these criminal and abusive activities, and TIs need to remember that. The gang stalkers surround and box the TI in to give the illusion of omnipresence, but they are really a contained group of mentally disturbed individuals. Those who are skeptical about the psychological coercion used within criminal activities can also learn more from this video. Here's a brief on what it is about. The following comes from The Heist, Darren Brown Special by Wikipedia.
The Heist is a 2006 British Darren Brown television special that aired on Channel 4. In the special, Brown uses the cover of a motivational seminar and documentary to see if he can persuade 4 members of a group of 13 businessmen and women to steal £100,000, in which they believe is a genuine armed robbery of a bank's security guard using a realistic-looking toy gun. The special was filmed over 2 weeks, during which Brown used various psychological tools, including conditioning, anchoring, and suggestion, to get the group into a mental state in which they would willingly try to rob a security guard without ever directly being told to do so. The anchoring involved created an emotional state that combined feelings of invulnerability, euphoria, and aggression that was then tied to various stimuli such as the color green, the song Can You Feel It by the Jacksons, and the sight of a security guard uniform, which could then all be presented to the participants when it came time to perform the heist. The participants were also asked to perform various deviant acts, such as stealing sweets from a store, which can serve both to condition participants to enjoy the feeling of criminality and to identify the 4 members who would be most likely to perform the heist. After filming, all 4 subjects were deprogrammed of any of their temporary criminal inclinations, spending time with both Brown and an independent psychologist.
Again, the video has nothing to do with gang stalking, and I am not insinuating that the creator or anyone involved is a gang stalker. It is being used strictly as an illustration. A gang stalker said that some people enjoy the thrill of doing something illegal. The gang stalkers who used to be decent people may have started because of the thrill of being bad. Gang stalkers who felt weak or helpless may have gotten a thrill out of dominating someone else. The perps who were criminals may get a thrill out of engaging in criminal activity and getting away with it, or even seeing members of the criminal administration system involved. It probably helps them to not feel so bad about their crimes. Members of the criminal administration system and the more prominent members are probably on a power trip and get a thrill out of secretly being on both sides of the law. Those are just a few possibilities. A while ago, I read a piece that stated that the gang stalkers could control a TI's mind and make a TI decide to live in a certain place. Here is another possibility. Most TIs report that their phones are tapped, calls are sometimes redirected, and their computers are hacked. Gang stalking includes cyber stalking. It is possible that when a TI is looking to move, his or her calls to ads could be redirected to a perp, or maybe the perps have someone working within a place to make it difficult for a TI to move somewhere the perps have a hard time getting to. When a TI is out in public, certain perps placed in certain places can cause a TI to sit in a pre-selected spot. So, if the perps want a TI to sit in a certain seat at a restaurant, they can either have a perp hostess place the TI there. If there is no hostess, then they can try to get perps to make other seats unavailable so that the TI has to sit in the pre-selected spot, or many other ways. There is probably a lot of external maneuvering to make a TI make a pre-selected, quote, choice, unquote. This is not to discount or dismiss anyone's claim, just to add to the other possibilities. Gang stalkers use many methods, not just one. There is a common theme in the campaigns, but each campaign may be modified by the TI's feedback, so the methods may vary. It is important for TIs to take note that the subjects in the heist were deprogrammed. It is possible to reverse the psychological coercion used in the campaign. TIs have to be careful whom they go to for medical services, so it may be better at this point for a TI to attempt some self-help until the gang stalking crime is fully exposed and assistance is finally available. TIs should avoid any hypnosis sessions. TIs can deprogram and desensitize themselves. Figure out how. Although hypnosis is effective, it is not an invincible force. The subject is just as powerful and may be even more powerful than the hypnotist. Being aware of covert hypnosis attempts is a good start to help keep you consciously on guard. Some people may make the mistake of trying to eliminate anything that resembles hypnotic techniques and may feel overwhelmed. That's because hypnosis plays on natural occurrences. Street hypnosis exploits, exaggerates, and distorts natural responses and trance states. Some of the sensations that occur in hypnosis are common in most people, so don't get paranoid in your own mind or body. Not all external influence is bad either. You just have to figure out how to separate your natural responses and thoughts from those of unwanted external influence. A famous experiment that showcased how some people readily carry out commands by authority figures can help explain why people become gang stalkers and how TIs can fall into the trap of adapting a prisoner mentality. The following comes from Stanford Prison Experiment by Experiment Resources.
Background. In 1971, The psychologist Philip Zimbardo tried to show that prison guards and convicts would tend to slip into predefined roles, behaving in a way that they thought was required rather than using their own judgments and morals. Zimbardo was trying to show what happened when all of the individuality and dignity was stripped away from a human and their life was completely controlled. He wanted to show the dehumanization and loosening of social and moral values that can happen to guards immersed in such a situation. Method. To conduct the Stanford prison experiment, Zimbardo constructed a mock correctional facility in the basement of Stanford University. Adverts were placed in local newspapers offering $15 per day for participation in this program. Of the 75 responses, the 24 male subjects judged to be most mentally and emotionally stable were selected. Mainly middle class and white, they were divided into two groups randomly of 12 prisoners and 12 guards. The group selected to be the guards were outfitted in the military-style, intimidating uniforms. They were also equipped with wooden batons and mirrored shades to prevent eye contact and make the guards appear less human. In an initiation meeting, Zimbardo, who acted as the warden for the duration of the Stanford prison experiment, informed the guards that the only rule was that no physical punishment was allowed. Other than that, the guards were to run the prison as they saw fit and would be divided into regular working shifts and patterns. Prisoners, by contrast, were dressed in cheap smocks and were allowed no underwear. They were to be addressed by and answered to identity numbers only. They also had a small chain around one ankle to remind them that they were inmates in a correctional facility. Conditions were tough, with only basic sleeping mattresses and plain food being supplied. The prisoners were instructed to wait at home to be called for the start of the experiment. Their homes were raided without any warning, arrested by the real local police department, and charged with armed robbery. The Palo Alto police had agreed to help with the experiment. As if they were real-life suspects, the prisoners were read their rights and had their mugshots and fingerprints taken. After being stripped, searched, and deloused, they were taken into the cells that will be their homes for the next 2 weeks. Zimbardo, acting as a prison warden, would be able to observe and make notes about what happened during the course of the study. Results. The Stanford prison experiment degenerated very quickly, and the dark and inhuman side of human nature became apparent very quickly. The prisoners began to suffer a wide array of humiliations and punishments at the hands of the guards, and many began to show signs of mental and emotional distress. On the second day of the experiment, the prisoners organized a mass revolt and riot as a protest about the conditions. Guards worked extra hours and devised a strategy to break up and put down the riot using fire extinguishers. No prompt for this action was given by Zimbardo. The guards used their own initiatives to formulate the plan. Standard prisoner counts and roll call became a trial of ordeal and ritual humiliation for the prisoners, with forced exercise and physical punishments becoming more and more common. Mattresses were confiscated from the prisoners, and they were forced to sleep on cold, hard floors. Toilet facilities became a privilege instead of a basic human right, with access to the bathroom being frequently denied. The inmates often had to clean the toilet facilities with their bare hands. Prisoners were often stripped and subjected to sexual humiliation as a weapon of intimidation. The Stanford prison experiment showed that 1/3 of the guards began to show an extreme and embedded streak of sadism, and Zimbardo himself started to become internalized in the experiment. 2 of the prisoners had to be removed early because they were showing real signs of emotional distress. Interestingly, none of the prisoners wanted to quit the experiment early, even when told that they would be denied their participation pay. The prisoners became institutionalized very quickly and adapted to their roles. A replacement prisoner was introduced and was instructed to go on hunger strikes as a protest about the treatment of his fellow inmates and as an attempt to obtain early release. Surprisingly, his fellow inmates viewed him as a troublemaker rather than a fellow victim trying to help them. When the inmates were informed that if the rest of the prisoners gave up their blankets, he would be released from solitary confinement, all but one refused to give up their blankets. The Stanford prison experiment carried on for 6 days until an outsider, Christina Mustak, a graduate student who would later become Zimbardo's wife, was brought in to interview guards and prisoners and was shocked by the scenes that she was witnessing. Zimbardo terminated the experiment early and noted that out of 50 external visitors, this lady was the only one to raise concerns about what was happening.
This illustrates how a new recruit to gang stalking may respond to the handlers and puppet masters. It also can make TIs and the audience aware of how gang stalkers can exploit their obedience to authority. The audience can be approached by gang stalkers posed as authority figures, whether real or fake, and be asked to do something against the TI. The Milgram experiment is also a good example of this. TIs can also find themselves being overly obedient to authority due to the desperation of the disadvantaged position forced on them. I'm not suggesting that TIs completely disobey authority, just that a TI should use their judgment and know that authority figures don't have the right to mistreat them. TIs should use their good judgment and recognize when an authority figure is behaving out of line and know how to handle the situation. If you have essential information for TIs, please email protectlifenow@yahoo.com.
TIs, it's time to know thy enemy.
Let's continue the exploration of emotional blackmail. The following comes from a review of emotional blackmail when the people in your life use fear, obligation, and guilt to manipulate you by Susan Forward, PhD. by Books Notes by Frumi.
The Four Faces of Blackmail. Punishers. Punishers let us know exactly what they want and the consequences we'll face if we don't give it to them are most glaring. They may express themselves aggressively, or they may smolder in silence, but either way, the anger is always aimed directly at us. The closer the relationship, the higher the stakes, and the more vulnerable we are to punishers. When blackmail escalates, the threatened consequences of not acceding to a punisher can be alarming. Abandonment, emotional cutoff, withdrawal of money or other resources, explosive anger directed at us, and at the most terrifying extreme, threats of physical harm. Self-punishers. Self-punishers turn the threats inward, threatening what they will do to themselves if they don't get their way. High drama, hysteria, and an air of crisis, precipitated by you, of course, surround self-punishers who are often excessively needy and dependent. They often enmesh themselves with those around them and struggle with taking responsibility for their own lives. The ultimate threat self-punishers can make is frightening in the extreme. It's a suggestion that they will kill themselves. Sufferers. Sufferers are talented blamers and guilt peddlers who make us figure out what they want, and always conclude that it is up to us to ensure they get it. Sufferers take the position that if they feel miserable, sick, unhappy, or are just plain unlucky, there's only one solution: our giving them what they want, even if they haven't told us what it is. They let us know in no uncertain terms that if you don't do what they want, they will suffer and it will be your fault. Sufferers are preoccupied with how awful they feel, and often they interpret your inability to read their minds as proof that you don't care enough about them. Tantalizers. Tantalizers put us through a series of tests and hold out a promise of something wonderful if we'll just give them their way. They are the subtlest blackmailers. They encourage us and promise love or money or career advancement, and then make it clear that unless we behave as they want us to, we don't get the prize. Every seductively wrapped package has a web of strings attached. Many tantalizers traffic in emotional payoffs, castles in the air full of love, acceptance, family closeness, and healed wounds. Admission to this rich, unblemished fantasy requires only one thing: giving in to what the tantalizer wants. Each type of blackmailer operates with a different vocabulary, and each gives a different spin to the demands, pressure, threats, and negative judgments that go into blackmail. There are no firm boundaries between the styles of blackmail, as they can be combined. A blinding fog. Emotional blackmail flourishes in a cloud just below the surface of our understanding. Our judgment becomes hazy in the midst of the fog. We're desperate to know, how did I get into this? How do I get out? How do I make these difficult feelings stop? When blackmailers pressure us, there is practically no time between feeling discomfort and acting to get relief. The real F word, fear. Blackmailers build their conscious and unconscious strategies on the information we give them about what we fear. The blackmailer's fear of not getting what they want becomes so intense that they become tightly focused, able to see the outcome they want in exquisite detail, but unable to take their eyes off the goal long enough to see how their actions are affecting us. At that point, the information they've gathered about us in the course of the relationship becomes ammunition for driving home a deal that's fed on both sides of fear. One of the most painful parts of emotional blackmail is that it violates the trust that has allowed us to reveal ourselves. Obligation. Often, our ideas about duty and obligation are reasonable, and they form an ethical and moral foundation for our lives. Sometimes these are out of balance. Blackmailers never hesitate to put our sense of obligation to the test. Reluctance to break up a family keeps many people in relationships that have gone sour. Most of us have a terrible time defining our boundaries. When our sense of obligation is stronger than our sense of self-respect and self-caring, blackmailers quickly learn to take advantage. Guilt. Guilt is an essential part of being a feeling responsible person. It's a tool of conscience. In its distorted form, registers discomfort and self-reproach if we've done something to violate our personal or social code of ethics. One of the fastest ways for blackmailers to create undeserved guilt is to use blame, actively attributing whatever upset or problems they're having to their targets. Once blackmailers see that their target's guilt can serve them, time becomes irrelevant. There is no statute of limitations. Guilt is the blackmailer's neutron bomb. It can leave the relationship standing, but it wears away the trust and intimacy that makes us want to be with them.
This information is focused on the people we willingly let into our life and form relationships with. But it also applies to the people who try to force themselves into our lives and into relationships. The excerpt mentioned that blackmailers build their conscious and unconscious strategies on the information we give them about what we fear. Granted that TIs usually don't directly tell the perps what they fear, the perps gather this information through the constant illegal surveillance and information gathering. Of course, they are not always correct, but they use it to build their strategies. If you find yourself asking, why would someone do this to a person they don't even know, please listen to the previous episodes. Now that you are aware of the 4 phases of emotional blackmailers and the FOG or FOG, keep in mind that a person can exhibit more than one of these. Occasionally exhibiting these traits is not emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail occurs when these things are used consistently to achieve one's agenda. Let's continue.
Tools of the trade. The tools are a constant that runs through the endlessly varied scenarios of emotional blackmail, and all blackmailers, no matter what their style, use one or more of them. The spin. Blackmailers see our conflicts with them as reflections of how misguided and off-base we are, while they describe themselves as wise and well-intentioned. They let us know that they ought to win because the outcome they want is more loving, more open, more mature. Any resistance on our part is transformed from being an indication of our needs to evidence of our flaws. In addition to discrediting the perceptions of their targets, many blackmailers turn up the pressure by challenging our character, motives, and worth. We may be labeled heartless, worthless, or selfish in any relationship with a blackmailer, but those labels are especially difficult to withstand when they're coming from a parent who can wipe out our confidence faster than anyone else. Pathologizing. Some blackmailers tell us that we're resisting them only because we're ill or crazy. This is called pathologizing. The experience of being pathologized can be a devastating blow to our confidence and sense of self, and is therefore an especially toxic and effective tool. Pathologizing often arises in love relationships when there's an imbalance of desires. More love, more time, more attention, more commitment. When it's not forthcoming, he or she questions our ability to love. Like the spin, pathologizing makes us unsure about our memories, our judgments, our intelligence, and our character. With pathologizing, the stakes are higher and can make us doubt our sanity. Enlisting allies. When single-handed attempts at blackmail are ineffective, blackmailers call in reinforcements, for example, family members or friends, to make their case for them and to prove that they are right. They may turn to a higher authority, such as the Bible. Negative comparisons. Blackmailers often hold up another person as a model, a flawless ideal against which we fall short. Negative comparisons make us feel suddenly deficient. We react competitively. The inner world of the blackmailer. Emotional blackmailers hate to lose. Blackmailers can't tolerate frustration. To the blackmailer, frustration is connected to deep, resonant fears of loss and deprivation, and they experience it as a warning that unless they take immediate action, they'll face intolerable consequences. These convictions may be rooted in a lengthy history of feeling anxious and insecure. Complementing and reinforcing possible genetic factors are powerful messages from our caretakers and society about whom we are and how we are supposed to behave. Blackmailers believe that they can compensate for some of the frustrations of the past by changing the current reality. The potential for blackmail rises dramatically during such crises as a separation or divorce, loss of a job, illness, and retirement, which undermine blackmailers' sense of themselves as valuable people. Often, people who have had everything and have been overprotected and indulged have had little opportunity to develop confidence in their ability to handle any kind of loss. At the first hint that they might be deprived, they panic and shore themselves up with blackmail. Usually, blackmailers focus totally on their needs, their desires. They don't seem to be the least bit interested in our needs or how their pressure is affecting us. They often behave as though each disagreement is the make or break factor in the relationship. Blackmailers frequently win with tactics that create an insurmountable rift in the relationship. Yet, the short-term victory often appears to be enough of a triumph, as if there were no future to consider. Most blackmailers operate from an I want what I want when I want it mindset. Any logic or ability to see the consequences of their actions is obscured by the urgency blackmailers feel to hold on to what they have. The most important thing to take away from the tour of a blackmailer's psyche is that emotional blackmail sounds like it's all about you and feels like it's all about you, but for the most part, it's not about you at all. Instead, it flows from and tries to stabilize some fairly insecure places inside the blackmailer. Many times, it has more to do with the past than the present, and it's more concerned with filling the blackmailer's needs than with anything the blackmailer says we did or didn't do.
Emotional blackmail is not isolated to gang stalking, so the elements can be recognized elsewhere. It's one of those things where you know something is wrong but can't pinpoint it. Hopefully this helps make unhealthy patterns in your relationships more noticeable so that corrective measures can be taken. TIs can now identify when these methods were used against them prior and during the time they became aware of the campaigns.
So you're forced into a system of unwanted pursuit? Here's some survival tips.
During the last episode, we explored child and adult bullying. Bullycide is the term used to describe cases where the bullies intentionally or unintentionally drive their targets to suicide. The law currently has a narrow definition of suicide. It's simply the taking of one's own life. However, bullycide cases, as well as other cases, show that someone can be driven to such an act. In those cases, the person did it to escape the unbearable harassment of the offenders. A case can be made that involuntary suicide, as in the case of bullycide, should be or can be considered involuntary manslaughter. I'm not a lawyer, and this is coming from a quick search on Wikipedia. It's just to brainstorm ways to get justice for TIs and victims of basic bullying cases. This is coming from Wikipedia, and serious, in-depth research needs to be done to work out the details. The following comes from Manslaughter by Wikipedia.
Involuntary manslaughter is the unlawful killing of a human being without malice aforethought. It is distinguished from voluntary manslaughter by the absence of intention. It is normally divided into two categories: constructive manslaughter and criminally negligent manslaughter. Criminally negligent manslaughter. It occurs where death results from serious negligence or, in some jurisdictions, serious recklessness. A high degree of negligence is required to warrant criminal liability. A related concept is that of willful blindness, which is where a defendant intentionally puts himself in a position where he will be unaware of facts that would render him liable.
The following comes from Criminal Negligence by Wikipedia.
Negligence shows the least level of culpability, intention being the most serious, and recklessness of intermediate seriousness, overlapping with gross negligence. The distinction between recklessness and criminal negligence lies in the presence or absence of foresight as to the prohibited consequences. Recklessness is usually described as a malfeasance where the defendant knowingly exposes another to the risk of injury. The fault lies in being willing to run the risk. But criminal negligence is a misfeasance or nonfeasance where the fault lies in the failure to foresee and so allow otherwise avoidable dangers to manifest. In some cases, this failure can rise to the level of willful blindness, where the individual intentionally avoids adverting to the reality of a situation. In the United States, there may sometimes be a slightly different interpretation for willful blindness. The degree of culpability is determined by applying a reasonable person standard. Criminal negligence becomes gross when the failure to foresee involves a wanton disregard for human life.
The following comes from Willful Blindness by Wikipedia.
Willful blindness, sometimes called ignorance of law, willful ignorance, or contrived ignorance, or Nelsonian knowledge, is a term used in law to when an individual seeks to avoid civil or criminal liability for a wrongful act by intentionally putting himself in a position where he will be unaware of facts which would render him liable.
When gang stalking is exposed, the street teams can be charged with willful blindness or contrived ignorance for the stalking, voyeurism, harassment, and involuntary suicide of any TI that takes his or her own life. Bullies, cronies, and accomplices should also be considered for willful blindness. It's difficult sometimes to find the main person responsible for the death. Early on, bullies learned that their malicious acts could get them in big trouble with the general public. So, when they did something wrong, they got another person or a group of people to do it too, so that either the blame could be spread, they can point to the other people who also did the same thing and escape or reduce punishment, or get a group to do it so the devious act would seem less severe or more acceptable. The bully is behind the whole thing, but she or he will make sure to blackmail those whom she or he got to go along with the misdeed in case they change their mind or try to report the misdeed. A law for involuntary suicide would deter the bully's cronies and would-be accomplices. The classic reassurances that a bully makes is, "No one's going to find out, don't be scared," or "There's no way that we'll get caught or get in trouble." With a law on the books that is actually used, the cronies and accomplices at least have a legal out when the bully calls. Just a thought. Other effects of bullying are bullied person syndrome and bullied worker syndrome. These terms are yet to be officially recognized by medical professionals but appear in bullying cases. Whereas bullycide causes the victim to inflict self-harm, these two do the opposite. In the last episode, the similarities between bullied person syndrome and battered woman syndrome were reviewed. There is an element of learned helplessness as the victims receive little assistance with the bullying and may have difficulty finding a new job that fits into their lifestyle, financial needs, or levels of fulfillment. Usually, when a victim starts to hate work, it has more to do with the bullying than the type of work that is being done. Since an investigation may not lead to any findings, the victim may feel as if she or he can't fight back without the clear evidence that the covert abuse isn't allowing him or her to get. Remember that bullies try to dominate others, which means trying to take away the victim's personal power. Bullies also tend to get bolder the more they are able to blame and/or silence the victim. So the mobbing may get worse until the victim feels the only way to regain his or her power back is to eliminate the bully. Hence, the violence or shooting. Bullied person syndrome follows the same format, except the name encompasses violence that occurs outside the workplace, as in the case of school or college shootings or community violence, etc. There were recent news reports about a bullycide where a young man from Buffalo, New York took his own life after a prolonged period of relentless bullying. In an effort to try to prevent more bullycides, here are tips on how to bully-proof yourself. The article is geared towards youth, but adults can learn from it too. The following comes from Bully-Proofing Youth Techniques, Verbal Bullying by Isaacs.
Students who target feed on fear, attention, and things. Take these away and you will starve bullying behavior. Just like a stray dog will go away if you stop feeding it, bullies also move on when they don't get the reaction they want from the kids they target. Kids who target others are constantly testing everyone around them. If you pass their test, you are left alone. If you fail their test, they continue to target you, and others start to target you. This is the swarm effect. First, one kid picks on you, then two, then four, and pretty soon every bully in the school is picking on you. It's almost as if you have one of those Arby's hats glowing over your head saying, "Come pick on me." The good news is that once you learn to take away fear, attention, and things, the Arby's hat goes away and the bullies go away with it. When you respond correctly, they will leave you alone as fast as they swarmed you. You can't control being tested, but you absolutely determine if you continue to be picked on. The bully will not continue to target you unless you give them the reactions they are seeking. I don't care how many flaws you think you have. It doesn't matter. The more things about you that bullies make fun of means only one thing. You may get tested more than other kids, but once you learn to pass their test, you will not be picked on anymore. This technique has worked for kids with many extreme disabilities and shortcomings. They got tested more than their peers, but once they mastered these techniques, they were left alone. Fear. Don't show kids who are bullying any fear. Fear reactions is what kids who target feed off of and use to scare their peers into doing whatever they say. If you show any signs of fear, that alone can be enough to keep the boy or girl coming back and picking on you again and again. Most people are not aware that they give off fear signals. These are natural reactions to being uncomfortable. First, you must learn what fear signals you are sending. Then you must learn and practice sending non-fear signals. This must be practiced until you can do it without thinking at home. Then practice in real bullying situations with a friend giving you feedback later about any fear you are still radiating. Adults will rarely be able to witness bullying, so peers are the only real feedback available. Below are all the ways we tend to send fear signals when we become scared, nervous, upset, or angry. Each of the different parts of the body reacts to uncomfortable situations instinctively and feed the dance. Below, we will learn how to change these habits to react in the right way. Each section describes the wrong and the right way to control all the different parts of the body when you are being picked on by a bully. Head. Wrong. Head tipped forward and down. Tipping the head forward projects fear to a bully, and this will keep him or her coming back to pick on you over and over. Right. Keep your head tipped slightly up. This makes you appear calm and relaxed. Eyes. Wrong. Looking down or nervously around with your eyes. If you watch two dogs approach each other, one of them will always look down and let the other dog know that he or she is in charge. This in charge feeling is what a bully seeks when picking on you. If you feed him or her that feeling, he or she will continue to target you. Right. Always keep your eyes higher than eye level and focus on something in the distance. Don't look directly over the bully's head. Always slightly to the right or left. This will keep your eyes up, and it will also keep your eyes from moving nervously around the room. By doing this, you will not be projecting fear with your eyes. Don't look at the bully because this will feed him or her your attention, and he or she might be able to see fear in your eyes. Mouth. Wrong. Chin shaking or moving side to side. Lips held apart and trembling. These signals will tell the bully that you are uncomfortable and scared. The more uncomfortable you appear, the more confident the kid picking on you becomes. Often, a bully will become more aggressive as the victim appears more afraid. Right. Push your tongue against the roof of your mouth or behind your front teeth. This will stop your jaw from shaking. Bring your lips together to stop your lips from trembling, but don't squeeze them together. Your goal is to look as relaxed and calm as possible. Yawning a couple of times quietly will project a very relaxed impression. If you appear bored and relaxed, that is the opposite of being afraid. Remember how hard it is to sleep after you watch a scary movie. If you appear sleepy, you can't appear scared at the same time. Breathing. Wrong. Allowing your breath to speed up. this indicates fear. Right, slow down your breathing silently and maybe yawn subtly. Really be careful to look natural and not forced. A fake yawn will make things worse. Shoulders. Wrong. Curled forward and or pulled up towards your ears. Just like a turtle, when we become afraid, we try to pull our arms, legs, and heads into our shell. Unfortunately, we don't have shells, so we wind up curling our shoulders forward and pulling them up toward our ears. We also tend to keep our arms close to our body and our legs and feet close together. Right. Keep your shoulders down and relaxed so you don't look tense and afraid. Do not push them down too hard or you will look tense. Arms. Wrong. Holding your arms close to your body. Remember to not hold your arms up close to your body like a kangaroo. Also, moving your arms stiffly projects fear. Right. Let your arms and shoulders swing loosely and naturally as you move. Be careful not to over-exaggerate this or you will look uncomfortable instead of relaxed and confident. Imagine that your arms and shoulders are loose and relaxed. Always drag your arms naturally with your shoulders. Do not move your arms independently of the shoulder or it will not look natural. Any muscle tension in the body radiates fear. Hands and fingers. Wrong. Letting the bully see your fingers shaking or balled into fist. If the bully sees your fingers shaking, they will know you are afraid, no matter what other techniques you do to hide your fear. If they see you making fists, you will appear to be tense, and they will know they are getting to you. Right. Hold your fingers together and curl them slightly to look natural. Don't look at your hands while you are doing this. Simply bring your fingers together in a loose, curled karate chop position. Next, bring the thumb to the curled index finger for somewhere to let it rest naturally.
These tips can help you think of more ways to bully-proof yourself. In the bully side case mentioned earlier, the authorities may seek to prosecute the bullies. On one show, a reporter asked if the authorities were taking it too far, and a guest replied that he thought kids are mean to each other all the time, and maybe that these kids didn't realize that their taunts would lead to suicide. He also mentioned that it was time to bring the parents in and have them talk to their kids about bullying. The following is not in regards to this particular case because the full details aren't known yet. Child bullying is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it is what TIs have been trying to tell the general public for a long time. A common complaint when the bully's parents get involved is that they are often bullies themselves. The dysfunctional behavior is often condoned at home, and there are cases where some of these parents are still bullying others. For example, cases of stalking, office mobbing, and, of course, gang stalking. Gang stalking is real. It's disturbing and disgusting. Perps get a kick out of giving other people a hard time or trying to ruin someone's life. A suicide does not bother them. They consider it an accomplishment. They feel powerful being responsible for someone's death and getting away with it. They have blood on their hands, although they may not have directly killed the target. America has been down this road before. It was not long ago that hate and extremist groups terrorized innocent people. They thought they had the right to decide other people's life and ruin anyone who disagreed with them. They had the support of the law, and the people who disagreed with them stayed silent. Countless innocent lives were lost and destroyed until the victims decided to speak up. Then those who disagreed also raised their voices, and soon it was clear that the hateful people were really just a small group who cared only about themselves, not the country they claimed to be patriotic towards. Even though their way of life was destroying the country and preventing progress, they would rather see the nation fall than stop attacking the innocent people who didn't agree with their destructive way of life. When the country started to make progress and the law no longer supported their crimes, they went underground and changed their methods to operate above, under, or just within the limits of the law. Their activities were never about America. It was about their own power. It wasn't even about their group. It was about the individuals who were running the operations and benefiting the most. The lower level members were disposable. Unfortunately, gang stalking is a combination of methods used by hate groups and extremist groups in conjunction with technology that allows more efficient and private communication. The targets are multicultural, and so are the offenders. The gang stalkers may be diverse, but they share the same hate-filled and destructive mentality. This all makes gang stalking more steep and dangerous. America does not need to go down that road again, but that's where we're headed. It's not too late to get back on the right path. The future of the nation depends on it. These tips are meant to help victims regain their personal power and correct their own lives. Big changes start with these individual acts of courage. The following comes from The Hypnotic Gaze Induction, Ladies Beware, by Cybersleuth.
Have you ever felt you are being watched? Did your gut instincts tell you? When you looked over your shoulder, there he was, staring right at you. Was it a warm, intense gaze with a smile? Some people are able to project strong, intense feelings through their gaze. I had this one friend, and he would go to a nightclub and sit at the bar. He would scan the room with his eyes and soon pick out the girl he would focus on. It only took a matter of minutes before she would look up and feel the intensity of his gaze. Initially, the girl may look away, but we all know that curiosity would get the best of her. On her second glance, there was a channel from his eyes to her eyes. The whole room evaporated. The crowd, the noise, they were gone. The lock was on. Like a lion freezing its prey, it seemed like there was nothing she could do. He was different to her. He was magnetizing her and drawing her in. He was trying to bypass her conscious level and access her subconsciousness. He thought that the more intuitive, aware, and educated the woman, the more susceptible she was to this type of individual. The closer he got to her, the stronger the influence. When asked a question, he hoped she would have a difficult time answering due to the mesmeric effects of the gaze. What was this man doing? Why was he doing it? The motive may vary from individual to individual. The motive may be linked to power, control, sexual desire, or even a more base primordial instinct. This man was using the direct gaze induction technique. He was bypassing her critical faculties and directly accessing her subconscious level. He could make a suggestion and it would be placed in her sub-psyche. She would not even be aware of the ramifications. What is direct gaze induction technique? I'm glad you asked this question. Only by understanding what it is and how it is used can an individual, or in this case the lady at the nightclub, take measures and defend herself against a strong, intense, suggestive gaze. Involved with the confident direct gaze is a 4-stage protocol which the hypnotist is attempting to institute. These are 1. Absorbing attention, the lock. 2. Bypassing the conscious level and therefore an individual's critical faculties. 3. Generating an unconscious response from the individual, for example, accessing their sub-psyche. And finally, 4. Planting the thoughts into the individual's sub-psyche to take various actions. Look up direct gaze induction technique on Google and there will be plenty of information on the method. Many professional hypnotists and hypnosis societies will say as a general rule that a person cannot be hypnotized unwillingly. They say this on the record in order to cover themselves legally should one of their hypnotic inductions develop serious consequences. I, however, disagree with this statement and am inclined to believe that anyone, given the right circumstances and conditions, can easily be hypnotized. How does the lady in the nightclub defend against a possible hypnotic induction? Another good question. First, she should always be aware of the possibility that someone may be trying to place her into a trance-like state. Awareness of your surroundings and of the capabilities of the people around you are very important. Secondly, if you do happen to come into contact with an individual with an intense gaze, even if he appears warm and friendly, look down and away from that individual. Do not let him put the lock on, and certainly be very wary of communicating with him. A practitioner of the hypnotic direct gaze induction method will be well versed in slowing down his voice, intonation, and the power of suggestion. Be very wary of this type of individual.
Those are some tips to get you started on finding ways to prevent unwanted hypnosis. In addition, critical thinking, checking the origin and validity of information are other prevention methods. The phrase about only intelligent people can be hypnotized is debatable. It could make more people want to be hypnotizable to prove that they are intelligent. Or, on a similar note, the one that says that intelligent people are easier to hypnotize than less intelligent people because they can focus and follow instructions better. This, too, makes people want to focus more and follow the hypnotist's instruction more just to prove themselves. It isn't necessarily true. The subject can resist hypnosis. Hypnotists even have alternative methods specifically for those who resist a trance. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Remember to always practice thinking critically. Be careful when feeling pressured to be absorbed in a conversation. Sometimes it happens, but know when it is happening naturally. Be able to get unabsorbed if you sense some unwanted influence. Covert hypnotists try to take advantage of naturally occurring trance states, so try not to be on automatic all the time. Know something about covert hypnosis techniques in order to recognize when it is being used and find ways to neutralize or prevent its effects. There are classes and CDs that teach hypnosis. TI should be careful if taking these courses because some of these courses require the students to undergo hypnosis. A TI should avoid any type of hypnosis. Another aspect of covert hypnosis that made it likely to be one of the psychological coercion methods used in gang stalking was the congruence or external alignment method. TIs have reported that the gang stalkers would copy their habits, routines, clothing style, movements, among other things. External alignment uses all these aspects to covertly hypnotize someone. The external alignment could also have been used before and after the TI became aware of the campaign. Before meant that it was used to create rapport and get close to the TI for information gathering, but the same method used after the TI was aware of the campaign and done in an obvious manner would unsettle and agitate the TI in order to hasten the breakdown. TIs must also become aware of the low-tech psychological coercion that is probably heavily used by the criminal administration and community segments. The intense surveillance methods will pick up information that can be used to influence you and give the perps an illusion of almost superhuman powers. It is likely that they are using your natural responses and those responses natural to people in general against you. The methods consist of exaggerations or misuse of normal responses, events, or interactions. They may imitate naturally friendly personalities to draw you in, which may make you start being suspicious of anyone with this type of personality. A TI might start thinking that people who are openly mean and nasty are safer or more honest than friendly people. The TI may even start preferring friendships with openly mean and nasty people because the gang stalking left them thinking that the phony, friendly people were really mean underneath it all. It is also important to know the low-tech methods because when you are trying to find ways to fight back against your responses, you might find it especially difficult, not because the perp is so strong, but because you might be fighting yourself. For example, if you have a habit of being relaxed while listening to a certain song, a perp may try to start a nasty argument with you while another is playing the song in the background. You are probably so busy watching out for the perps that you don't even notice the song. So you decide that this time you want to just tell the perp to shut up and walk away. But find that you can't really say it like you want to and wind up being too nice about it. Before you go beating yourself up for being weak or stupid or whatever, try to remember what was happening during the incident. If the usually relaxing song was playing, but you hadn't realized it because you were distracted by the perps, chances are, on a subconscious level, you were relaxing, while on a conscious level, you were being agitated. Your subconscious mind probably thought you were really trying to relax, but couldn't, and may kick the relaxation attempts up a bit. So, internally, you were subconsciously trying to force yourself to relax, while consciously, you were on defense. Now, with this inner struggle going on, the perp can take advantage that your defense attempts are dampened by the relaxing song in the background. You may later think that the perp had some extra strong powers, but there are other reasons. The perps use these methods purposefully to make themselves look more powerful and tear you down. I am not competing with the claims of high-tech psychological coercion. As stated before, go to the websites that focus on that and consider the information before you dismiss those claims. This show focuses on the community and criminal administration segments, and these are the methods that could be used on these levels. With that said, these two segments can make a TI feel physically ill by using the same low-level psychological coercion. For example, the perps find out that you are allergic to, let's say, oranges. So, while you are out shopping, a perp may stand by giving the prompt or a sinister grin. You either didn't notice the perp was wearing an orange-scented fragrance, or a different perp was standing by with oranges in hand. Or maybe you did notice, but the fact that the perp was trying to agitate you made you forget about your allergies. You find yourself having an allergic response, but don't know why because you have forgotten about the presence of the oranges. It's important to take note of the low to mid-level psychological coercion so that you can consider ways to neutralize or prevent these tactics. Now you won't get so discouraged or beat yourself up for not handling an incident as effectively as you wanted. These examples don't disprove or contradict any claims of military or corporate involvement, nor any high-tech methods of psychological coercion. Again, visit the sites and organizations that research these segments for more information. Two popular sites that focus on those segments are Freedom from Covert Harassment and Citizens Against Technological and Community-Based Harassment, or CATCH. It seems that the gang stalking campaign was really meant to destroy the target. The TIs who have survived and are able to speak out aren't part of the gang stalkers' plan, so that's why they try so hard to discredit the survivors. It's possible that for everyone who has spoken out, many lives have been lost or silenced. There is a method to the gang stalkers' madness, and the general public is very lucky to have the TIs that are raising awareness about this heinous crime. These TIs probably saved a few lives and or prevented a few campaigns. I know it's tough, and you are being robbed of your rights, life, and liberties, but you are still bigger and better than the perps. A lot of work and a lot of ruthless people have been used to keep down just one person. One innocent life is worth more than all those wasted lives combined. Stay strong, TIs. The following comes from a review of emotional blackmail when the people in your life use fear, obligation, and guilt to manipulate you, by Susan Forward, PhD. By Booknotes by Frumi.
It takes two. Blackmail cannot work without the target's active participation. The target gives it permission to occur. You may be aware of the blackmail, but feel as though you can't resist it because the blackmailer's pressure sets off almost programmed responses in you and you're reacting automatically or impulsively. Blackmailers may be aware of your hot buttons. Faced with resistance, blackmailers' fear of deprivation kicks in and they use every bit of information to ensure that they prevail. The protective qualities that we have that open us up to emotional blackmail are an excessive need for approval, an intense fear of anger, a need for peace at any price, a tendency to take too much responsibility for other people's lives, a high level of self-doubt. When kept in balance and alternated with other behavior, none of these styles dooms you to the status of preferred target of an emotional blackmailer. Emotional blackmailing takes training and practice. Emotional blackmailers take their cues from our responses to their testing, and they learn from both what we do and what we don't do. The impact of blackmail. Emotional blackmail may not be life-threatening, but it robs us of our integrity. Integrity is that place where our values and our moral compass reside, clarifying what's right and wrong for us. We let ourselves down. A vicious cycle ensues, rationalizing and justifying the impact of our well-being, mental health, physical pain as a warning. We may betray others to placate the blackmailer. It sucks the safety out of the relationship. We may shut down and constrict emotional generosity. Part 2. Turning understanding into action. To change, we need to know what we have to do, and then we have to act. If you're willing to take action now and let your feelings of confidence and competence catch up with you, you can end emotional blackmail. The first step. 3 simple tools. 1. A contract. 2. A power statement. I can stand it. 3. A set of self-affirming phrases. Step 1. Stop. You don't make a decision about how to respond the moment a demand is made. Give yourself time to think. Step 2. Become an observer. Gather the information you need to respond to the blackmailer. Understand what is really happening. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are your flashpoints? Keep observing until you begin to make connections between your beliefs, feelings, and behavior. A time for decision. There are 3 categories of demands. 1. The demand is no big deal. 2. The demand involves important issues and your integrity is on the line. 3. The demand involves a major life issue and or by giving in would be harmful to you or others. Stretch out your decision-making process, carefully considering how much each option will affect your life and your integrity. When you make decisions based on criteria that are your own rather than the blackmailers, you have dealt a crippling blow to the emotional blackmail.
Once emotional blackmail is identified, these tips will help you to figure out ways to neutralize the impact, end the interaction if necessary, or get the interaction on a healthy track. Try it and send your feedback to protectlifenow@yahoo.com.
Now it's time for TI News. I'm always looking for news stories about stalking, especially gang stalking. So if you find a news story that appeared in an official news source, please email it to protectlifenow@yahoo.com. So here's the news for today.
The following comes from Italian Hypnotist Sent Cashier into Trance by Richard Owen. Many shoppers must have felt their eyes glaze over as they filled their trolleys, not least over a holiday weekend. But in one supermarket in Italy, paying at the checkout has proved to be a truly mesmerizing experience. Police are trying to trace a bearded man of Indian appearance who allegedly hypnotized a supermarket cashier near Ancona on the Adriatic coast into handing over 800 euros without her realizing what was happening. The episode was captured on CCTV footage, which appears to authenticate the story. Police said the man and his female accomplice, possibly his wife, had taken a carton of milk to the checkout at the Familia supermarket and had offered a 50-euro note by way of payment. The camera recorded the fact that the cashier's movements began to slow down at this point and that she appeared to be obeying the man's commands automatically. By the time she came to, the man and the woman had disappeared with change of 800 euros. The cashier told police she remembered handing over the money, but nothing else. She only realized the money was gone when she realized the till takings were short, at which point the CCTV footage was checked. She said the last thing she remembered was the bearded man leaning over and saying, "Look into my eyes." Police said the man appeared respectable, was dressed in a suit, and probably in his 40s. The role of his female companion seemed to be to distract other customers while the hypnotist went to work. This report just goes to show that covert hypnosis can be used for criminal purposes. There were other news reports about people using covert hypnosis to commit crimes. Not everyone who uses street hypnosis does so for criminal reasons. A lot of it is done for entertainment purposes, but the difference in entertainment cases is that the subject was told what happened, was able to laugh along, and no one was hurt. Unfortunately, there are some who use it for the wrong reasons. The following comes from TV hypnotist boyfriend of woman accused of murdering their 2 children in Spain is jailed for sexually abusing young girl by Daily Mail reporter. Former television hypnotist Martin Smith, aged 45, who used violence to groom and sexually abuse a young girl, carried out the attacks over a 9-year period. The victim, who is now in her 20s, told the jury during his case how he would try to hypnotize her and hit and bully her to ensure she complied with his demands. He was found guilty of 11 specimen charges of rape, attempted rape, indecency with a child, and indecent assault, spanning 9 years from May 1995 to May 2004 in December. Hilary Manley, prosecuting, told Liverpool Crown Court today that Martin Smith began the abuse by forcing the girl to touch him intimately. On occasion, he would turn violent, act in a domineering and bullying manner, and use hypnotism in an effort to bend her to his will, the court heard. He would attempt to hypnotize her, although she would simply pretend to be under the influence of hypnotism, the prosecutor added. Eventually, Smith stopped trying to hypnotize the girl and simply went on to rape her repeatedly from the age of 13, the court heard. She she would try to say no to him. However, it continued, said Miss Manley. He emphatically denied all the allegations when he was arrested and was bailed, and went to Spain with his family. Although the abuse ended in 2004, the police were not told until November 2007. Sentencing Smith, Mr. Justice Stephen Irwin said he trapped and overwhelmed his victim with repeated sexual assaults over a sustained period of time. You had so domineered her that she was crushed by you, said Mr. Justice Irwin. Mr. Justice Irwin said Smith represented a high risk of serious harm to any girls who might find themselves under his influence in the future. This was an especially tragic story, but again, it is important that hypnotists realize that there are serious legal consequences to using their skills for the wrong reasons. He is not the first hypnotist to be convicted of using hypnosis to rape someone, but hopefully the convictions will deter others from using hypnosis to abuse other people.
That's it for this episode. If you would like to share your stalking story with Tenani, please check out the Protect Life Now's organized harassment video on YouTube. You can also email protectlifenow@yahoo.com for more information. If any gang stalkers disagree with the information presented, please let us know. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.